Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Chocolate Travels. I'm Joseph with Bean to Bar World, and I'm here with Fernando from Chokaico. So, welcome, Fernando. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Joseph. Hi, everybody.
When and why did you decide to make chocolate from Bean to Bar? Were you familiar with any craft chocolate before delving into it? How did it all start?
Great question. I had been eating dark chocolate for a long time, for like the last, I don't know, 20, 25 years. I recognized dark chocolate as, having more substance than your regular
Hmm.
milk chocolate bar or, you're like a candy bar, like your Mars, Hershey's, anything like that. And I grew up in Ecuador until I was 19 years old. And actually, we lived near a chocolate factory
Okay.
called La Universidad in Guayaquil, the city where I'm from.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, you could just smell, the waft of fragrances coming out of that factory. It just permeated throughout the neighborhood. It
Hmm.
was like less than half a mile from where we live. So every once in a while, you had that distinct, chocolate
Okay.
aroma just encompassing, enrobing the entire neighborhood. You could say I grew up around chocolate too, because my uncles in the province of Manabi, which happens to be a very sought after origin in Ecuador. They own small, mostly cattle farms, but they also had some cacao, some cafe, like they
Ah,
do
okay. Yeah.
multiple crops.
Hmm. Hmm.
And Once in a while, I would go with my cousins to harvest
Hmm.
the cacao, and
Okay.
suck on the beans and all the whole thing, and you know, just exposed to cacao from a very early age.
Hmm.
And then once I started, traveling abroad, like in Europe, usually I would go into a chocolate store and look for Ecuadorian cacao, because I wanted
Hmm.
to relieve those memories
Hmm. Hmm.
of being back home. So yeah, I've been a chocolate lover for a
Okay.
long time.
Yeah, yeah. So it's sort of ingrained. And it's nice that you were able to grow up around both the cacao and the chocolate making right there in Ecuador. So it was part of your life, part of your growing up. Is that pretty common for people in Ecuador? A lot of them connected to cacao and chocolate? Is that sort of part of the culture there? Or it depends where you
So
live?
it depends where you live. Yeah. So there's no cacao up in the Andes, just too high up. But
Hmm.
in between, there are really good cacao regions as you go up on, climbing up the Andes. But I'm from the coastal area where all five provinces that border the Pacific Ocean
Okay.
um, grow cacao
Hmm.
from all the way from La Provincia de El Oro to province Los Rios, Guayas, where I was born, Manabí, where my family is from, and then Esmeraldas.
Hmm.
Those five coastal provinces are heavy cacao producing regions.
Hmm.
I'm sure you've heard Ecuador was one of the top growing exporters of cacao in the turn of the 1900s. Um, it was like the hottest commodity before oil and bananas. Even cacao was the main export for Ecuador.
Did you ever
And
think back then that you would be involved somehow in cacao or in chocolate making over the
No,
years?
no,
No?
no, never. I was a city kid, so I didn't like too much the countryside. Like
Right.
I saw it as kind of boring, and like, you know,
You went
incorrectly,
all
of
the
course,
way
because
you went all the way to New York eventually, right? That's a
yeah,
completely
yeah,
different different scene.
correct. Yeah, yeah. So, when I was growing up, I wanted to be, first, I think I wanted to be my first thing I wanted to be was an oil engineer, because there was a big oil boom in Ecuador. So,
Mm,
my brother said, "Oh, that's going to be a great, need for that. So I said, oh yeah, I'm going to study, oil engineering. Um, then I switched and I wanted to be an architect, and at one point I wanted to be a pilot. I even went and I did like the sort of recruitment, but
Mm.
I was too short. They were like, no, you're too short. Come back next year. So I was like, okay, all right, that's not gonna happen.
Did you ever
So, but
grow
then I
tall
got
enough?
no, not really. I did grow up, which is weird because I was 19 when I moved to New York, and I grew up another 2 inches.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I know. And so,
Interesting.
very interesting. I guess the change of climate, of
Yeah.
diet, I was eating richer foods, so
Hmm.
I guess it helped, it
Well,
helped me to grow
I
even
wish
more.
I wish I
But
moved to
yeah.
New York when I was 19 and grown a few more inches.
But yeah, I never thought
Mm.
about, oh, I kind of, my brother started going into the printing business. So I got into that with him, helping him to like layout type, with an actual lead type, and or like a movable case, with like a little hand press machine and all that.
Okay.
So I got into the graphic world through that. That was kind of my opening into the graphic world. And I wanted to be, a graphic designer, but I ended up in advertising design
Mm. Mm.
in New York. And I was doing that during, at night and working in restaurants during the day, working at, I was very lucky. My cousin worked at the Cirque and he got me in there.
Mm.
And I worked there for a couple of years in their banquet area, not in the main dining room per se, but they had a banquet room called L'Orangerie. And I worked there as a waiter. And, you know, that was just an eye opener as far as the culinary
Food.
world. But you're talking about the top restaurant in New York in those days, in the 80s, um, with even before Daniel Boulou arrived. There was a previous chef who had 3 stars
Mm.
with the New York Times, which was at that time, the top, one of the top places. Anyway, so I got to really, and I saw like the pastry chefs doing things, but I never thought about, oh, I'm gonna, I want to work in that. Like I was
Right.
focused in
But
design and,
you had an appreciation about it because you were around it, and I'm sure you got to try a lot of the stuff that was
oh
there.
yeah, oh
Yeah.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Like, the Cirque was the one that made creme brulee popular in New York.
Oh, okay.
That was I believe it was one of the first restaurants that did it at that level.
And then after that, you became a musician for a few years.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So uh, when I was working in one of these restaurants, a friend of mine from Uruguay was moving back to Uruguay, and he had this set of bongos in his apartment. And at his goodbye party, um, I grabbed them, and I was messing around with them. I had never taken a lesson or anything like that. Just monkeying around. I've always liked percussion, and music. And he said, "Oh, you like those? You if you want them, you can keep them, because he was moving. One of the skins was busted, and he was like, just keep them,
Mm, mm.
I'll give them to you." So I got those bongos, and I got, I had it fixed, and then I was like, well, now I need to learn how to play them. So I sought out some lessons, and I took a couple of lessons with bongos, but that was it. I never got too far into it. And then fast forward a few years later, when I was now working in design, a friend of mine started when I got there, he had already started a ska band, Latin ska reggae band called King Chango. My friend said, "Oh, you play the congas?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah." It's just I I I, I didn't lie my way into it, but he knew that I hadn't taken any lessons. But
Right, right.
after that, that prompted me to get some lessons because he said, like, man, you better take some lessons if you want to like jump on the stage with us. So that motivated me, to take some lessons. And sure enough, like a few months later, the band got an opportunity to open for this famous Mexican band called Café Tacuba.
Mm.
So there we were, and opening up for this band, and who happened to be there, but David Byrne
Okay.
from Talking Heads. He came to see Café Tacuba.
Mm.
He loves like all kinds of international music. He's a world music head. So he saw us, and he asked us to very much to sign to his label, like right there and then, just like that.
Wow.
And then and his label Luaka Bob was distributed with Warner Brothers. So it was a big
Yeah.
release. It
Yeah.
got released in the US, in Mexico, in
Oh, wow.
Spain, and all of a sudden we were traveling and touring the world. It was just,
Wow.
what a New York, a New York, a New,
all that just from finding some bongos in your
yeah,
apartment and just playing with them.
exactly. In
Wow.
my friend's apartment. Yeah, and what a New York moment, to have David Byrne come over and watch you play and sign you to his label. And then you're like, I was still doing graphic design here and there, but I sort of became a full-time musician. And
Yeah.
after I left that band and with a couple other guys from that band, we left and started another band called Antibalas. So it's a sort of an Afrobeat band. And, that band started touring as well. And um, with that same family, we had another, we also started another band called Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings. And that band, became very successful, and we released 6 or 7 albums and opened for a bunch of people. And
Mm.
there I was, I was a full-time musician at that
Wow.
time.
Hmm.
So to bring it to a close, so the music thing stopped. Sharon unfortunately passed away,
Mm.
and our son was born with very, very heavy congenital heart defect.
Mm.
So I sort of stopped touring, and I kind of, to be in the music, business, you have to be there a lot, make connections and
Right.
whatnot. And after our band had sort of stopped, it was like starting from zero again, so it was hard for me to make the connections, not being able to go out at night anymore, so much because of our son. So I went back to graphic design. I
Mm. Mm.
um, uh, started looking for work and work nearby in Jersey, and then remotely, and here we are.
Okay. Wow, that's such an interesting chain of events in your life. A lot of
Yeah, yeah,
in Ecuador with the cacao and the chocolate, and then oil, and then advertising and fine dining and musician and advertising. Like it's sounds like you like change, you like challenges, you like new new
yeah.
challenges. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's part of my ADD or something, that just keeps me going from one place to the other. But it's
Yeah.
always, really
So
interesting
New York must
circumstances.
yeah. New York must have been exciting for you because there's just so much stimuli. There's always something to do.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I actually left New York. So when I first got there, after about a year and a half, I was like, man, screw this. It's too cold here. I couldn't handle coming from the tropics to New
Yeah.
York. So I moved to LA, lived there for about 8 months, then moved to Florida and Miami, lived there for about 4 or 5 months. And I was like, okay, I'm done. Let's go back to New York. And
Mm.
I went back to New York, and
What was it about New York that brought you back? What did you like about it?
Um, I'll be honest, the just the proximity of everything, the
Mm.
ease of, it's such a walkable city. Like you don't need a
Yeah.
car.
No.
Where in LA you can live without a car. Same thing in Miami, and I have more family in New York, also more
Mm.
relatives.
Mm.
So I wanted to go back, to my circle of family and friends, and I was more driven to continue going to design school, at that point.
Yeah.
And because it was hard when I lived in LA, I couldn't really work in restaurants. I wanted to continue working in going to school and work in restaurants, but just the whole commuting part, was always
Mm.
difficult.
Mm.
Where you live, where you work, and
Mm.
I just couldn't network the same way. It was really difficult, and
Mhm.
that's why I
Mhm.
moved to Miami, I had some friends there. I tried to network there and do things there, but same thing. I just couldn't handle it. And um, it was just a different mentality. Also, I thought
Yeah.
New York had more open mentality, to life in general, education, art,
Yeah.
everything. So yeah,
I feel
back to New
like
York it was. And yeah, I
New
never made
York, sort of
a
that
change.
area, that part seems to be more come as you are. Like anyone can find a place,
Yeah,
in big city
yeah,
like New York. You
yeah,
find your niche. There's something there for everybody. And
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
oh, very nice. Where did the name Chokaico come from, and why the image of the deer on your bars? How did that come together?
Yeah. So I wanted to have a very original name, something um, that sounded unique, and also something that wasn't taken. Because a lot of names, when you're thinking about a name, sometimes are taken.
Yeah.
And like I think I wanted to do something with like Chocoteca or something like that, like
Mm.
biblioteca, like bibliotech,
Oh,
Chocotec,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Chocoteca, or something like that. I forget the original names that I had, but a few of them were taken. And so I say, okay, well, let's try different combinations. That's where my creative brain, kind of works. And wanted to incorporate obviously the cho part into it, the chocolate,
Hmm.
name into it. So I don't know why I just created Chokaico. And like I
Okay.
wrote a few things and combined until I was like, okay, Chokaico. Is that taken? That's not taken. Okay, great. So
Nice.
that was the name. It was good. I knew like it was going to be hard for a lot of people to say it, to pronounce it, but so was
It's
Google
unique, it's
when it first came out.
original, so it's memorable. Like
Exactly. Yeah.
it won't get confused with other things on Google, and it
Right.
sounds chocolatey, right? That's what's important.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And then the mold, the deer imagery. When I'm a sort of part-time still to this day chocolate maker. Graphic design is still my main bread and
Mhm.
butter. Um, and chocolate is now, a bit of a supplemental income. Um, so at that time I was, still experimenting. So I bought a few molds from Chocolate World, and when I was looking for molds, that I saw one that had a deer, a stag, and I thought it was very unique.
Mm.
I looked up the meaning of, or association of a deer's, what is, and it said, creative, gentle,
Mm.
outdoors. I wanted to have that sort of outdoors kind of imagery. I like that sort of branding of it.
Mhm.
So I,
Mhm.
I went in that direction. And then, when it was time to create a logo, I was like, well, I guess I have to do something with a deer. So you know, I think I went around and looking for different clip arts
Right.
and, ended up tracing something and creating it, a little bit more unique,
Mhm.
making it a little bit more unique. And then I, refined it. And that's the logo and the name.
Okay. No, I like it. I always love, for some reason, ever since I was a kid, I love deers. I used to draw deers, and I even made
Oh,
a chocolate deer bust once. I
oh,
just
wow.
so when I saw yours, I was like, oh, I love that because I love deers, and
Yeah.
it's
And
a beautiful
what's
design. It's really nice.
Thank you. And it's funny because I created, the whole branding when we lived in New Jersey. And then we moved here to West Hartford, and there's a huge insurance company called the Hartford here
Mm,
in Hartford, Connecticut, which used to be the insurance capital of the world.
mm,
And their branding is a stag, a
mm.
deer. It's like their branding. So now people around here, when they see it, they're like, oh, how clever, with the deer and the Hartford thing. And I'm like,
Right. It's just a
thank
coincidence.
you, but it's a coincidence. I tell them I can't, just BS my way around it.
Yeah, yeah. But that would be a good collaboration if they want some gift favors, right? You got the branding there
Yeah,
already.
I did a post on the town's Facebook, announcing my chocolate business, and and put obviously the chocolate bars there, and somebody commented and
Mm,
tagged someone else and said,
mm.
"Hey, so and so, look, it's already branded." So they might work for the Hartford, or
Yeah, yeah,
maybe they work for another company that also uses a deer,
yeah.
but they never follow through with any kind of requests or anything. So one
Very
day
nice.
maybe.
Yep. What so what were the challenges you faced when you started to make chocolate from bean to bar? So it sounds like you're very new. Can you tell us when you actually started making chocolate and what were the challenges you faced?
Yeah. So the way I started is very sort of coincidental, serendipitous. I don't know what to call it.
Mm,
During the pandemic, I have a cousin so I told you I've been eating dark chocolate for a long time, and I have a cousin in Ecuador, one of the kids from the uncles that I told you about, who owned the cattle farm and
mm,
cacao, also some cacao farm. He started making chocolate, and I said to him, I love dark chocolate. Send me some, And eventually somebody traveled from Ecuador, and I was able to get some. And I tried it. I liked it. It was a little grainy, and I gave him the feedback. I said, if the flavor's there, it arrived a little bit bloomed, obviously because of the weather and whatnot, but the flavor was there, but the
mm,
texture was still a little grainy, and I
mm,
gave him that feedback and everything. Um, and I think at that point, after I gave him the advice, I was like, well, how do you make dark chocolate? So I went on YouTube, and I saw for the first time what a refiner does, how it
mm.
refines the nibs and all that. And,
I'm
I
sorry,
was
when
like,
was
huh.
this? What year was this?
So this is around
2020?
19, 2009,
Oh, okay.
2019,
Oh,
2000.
okay.
Yeah, 2019. This is pre-COVID.
Mm,
Um, and I ordered some bars. I think that was the first time so I used to just buy it wherever, I found it. But I think in 2019, it was the first time that I actually saw it out to buy online.
mm,
And I think the first people I bought from was Raka in Brooklyn.
mm,
I believe it was them. Then Dandelion. Um, uh, uh, then eventually, I think so. Pacari is a very famous Ecuadorian brand
yeah.
that makes amazing chocolate. I've always loved their chocolate.
Mm,
And they used to have it at Whole Foods, so I used to buy it there. And then,
mm,
for a brief period of time, then they stopped carrying it. Now I understand why. And we'll get to that later. um, but that was when I first, started getting into like how you make chocolate and just really getting into it.
mhm,
And uh, in 2020, I was going to go to Ecuador to visit my mom, who was stuck there with the pandemic, and my mom was getting older, and I wanted to go see her. And my cousin, the chocolate maker, said, "Hey, can you bring me a melanger, a
mm,
Spectra 11 melanger? I'll pay you over here because over here they're like almost 3 times the cost."
right.
So I said, "Yeah, of course. I'll stuff it in a bag, wrap it real good and bring it down." That was the idea. But um, then the pandemic got really bad, and I was like, okay, I can't travel, and our
Mm,
son is immunocompromised, so
mm,
I couldn't travel, and I was stuck with a melanger. Um, and I said to my cousin, man, I don't know when I'm going to be able to bring this to you. It's going to be a while, and I've been looking at how to make chocolate. Is it all right if I use it? He goes, yeah, by all means, go ahead. So
It sounds like the
I
starting of the bongo story again, just kind of
exactly
there and
find
like, can I
myself,
try?
yeah,
That's funny.
exactly. I just find myself, in the right place, and I'm a curious type of person. I'm like,
Mm,
and especially when it comes to food, like there's curiosity with benefits. So
yeah.
um, yeah, I bought some nibs from John Nancy, the Chocolate
Mm,
Alchemy. Hi, John. And I got some nibs, I got some butter. I saw his chocolate making course on YouTube, of course.
mm,
His whole course, and I followed his method, to the T. And bowl tempering, all of that, and the nibs were from Sorsal from Dominican Republic. I believe I only got from Sorsal that the first time,
okay.
and
It's a good source.
and the great source, yeah. And I was fortunate that somebody else was coming from Ecuador, and I had my cousin send me his beans from Ecuador. He sent me his beans from his farm, and I think he also sent me another set of not beans, but it was actually
Okay.
liquor that had already been, pre-refined and all of that. Um, and I used both, so by that time I'd already bought a used Benmore roaster. So I roast the beans that he sent me with the Benmore, and then of course I had to buy a cracker from John Nancy as well. I
Mm.
brought a winnower from him. I bought the champion juicer. I went the whole direction, and um, I was just hooked. Like the not just the way that things tasted, which was amazing when you make your own fresh bean to bar chocolate. It's an addiction. Like once you make it, you can't stop it. You just have to keep going because it's so good, and
Mm.
your family is happy, your friends are happy, everybody's like, oh my god,
Mm.
this is the best. It's just like you become very popular all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I miss that popularity.
Maybe, yeah,
Like
because you used
I'm
to
no
get it with
longer
the
on this.
music.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm no longer on the stage, but now I
Yeah.
have a different stage.
That's
It's
true.
weird.
That's a good point.
um I know,
Okay.
right? And so anyway, that's how I started making it,
Okay.
and
Okay. Very
never
nice.
looked back.
Okay. And so obviously it started off sort of like a hobby. Did
Yeah.
you, when you started that, did you think, oh, I'm going to start selling it? Or was there another point where you're like, hey, I can start selling this now?
I was busy with work, so I couldn't give it, all the time that I wanted to give it, because I just wanted to make chocolate, but that wasn't a way to pay bills. So
Hmm.
I had my remote. At this point, I started a remote position. So if I was idle at work, I was sorting beans or roasting beans or doing something, while files were uploading, or while we were not busy. Friends were like, you should sell this, you should sell, can
Mm.
I buy this, because they
Mm.
knew like it was expensive to make, like the ingredients are expensive, the equipment is expensive,
Mm.
so they're like, here, we'll pay you, and I was like, okay, sure, and then I was like, and my friends want to buy some, and
You have
sure,
it.
here you
You have
go.
very nice friends if they actually want to pay for it. They offered to pay for
I
it.
I know, I'm telling you, I do
Usually
have good
people just
friends.
want it. Usually people just give me, give me.
Yeah, no, 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 these are good friends, because they conscious friends.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are
Nice.
the kind of friends I like to keep.
Yeah, yeah.
I used them before, and I was like, oh, I can just do it on Shopify. It's easy, blah, blah, blah. Boom. I did it, and it was live, and then they're like, oh, we can sync it with your Instagram. And
Mm.
it's just everything was in sync. And I was like, wow, this is easy, for me. Like it's easy to just put it all together, brand
Mm.
it, and
Hmm.
then sell it online, and people were buying it online, mostly friends and acquaintances, but every once in a while there would be like just some random person that, I would say, hey, how do you hear about us? It's like, oh, I just Google, dark chocolate, bean to bar or something like that, and or the region maybe, or that they were searching for,
Mm.
and it was all clicking, it was all working, and
Nice.
uh, the local coffee shop. I did a few posts on Instagram. I followed him on Instagram. He followed me, and then when I did one of my first posts, he reached out. He's like, "We should do you should do a pop up. We should do a tasting, a pairing, a coffee and
Mm.
chocolate pairing."
Hmm.
So that was the initial door to that. Was the chocolate and coffee pairing, which
Oh,
now
okay.
I know it's not a great thing, not the best thing, because it's just so overpowering. The coffee.
It
I've
depends.
been
Yeah.
che- yeah, yeah. There's some coffees, depending on how you brew them, and you, it pairs well. But like when it's darker, and it's so overpowering, it's just
Right.
there's just the chocolate nuance. It's kind of there, but not really.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I like to do it with like medium to light roasts
Hmm. Hmm.
on the coffee side, and or teas, really good teas also.
Yeah. Or even a pour
Uh,
over, which tends not to be as intense.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I do. I have a Chemex. That's my old Chemex back there that broke and it's
Okay.
holding some dry flowers now. Anyway, so yeah, that's how the whole the store thing started.
Okay.
Was doing pop-ups and I was really sort of frustrated because I kind of had like a brand name and recognition in Jersey, and then my wife is like, we should move to Connecticut.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh,
Yeah, because it takes a lot of effort to
yeah,
build
to
that
get
up.
everything going.
Yeah.
But it was I mean, it was not, it was a no-brainer.
Right.
Our area in New Jersey blew up in terms of real estate prices,
Hmm.
and uh, we took the money and run. Basically, that's what we did. And we also wanted to be closer to her family is from here, from Connecticut. She grew up here in West Hartford,
Hmm.
and you know the the main reason was the education system for our son
Hmm.
up here
Hmm.
is just it's incredible. Like
Hmm.
a lot of one-on-one help, and not just one-on-one help, but really good one-on-one
Hmm.
therapists. He has the heart condition, but he also has autism.
Hmm.
So he needs a lot of help, and he's getting it. And also all the services here in the state. I told my wife it's like moving from New Jersey to Norway. In
Hmm.
terms of
Wow.
the progressiveness and the amount of
Support.
help for kids with autism up here is incredible.
Hmm.
So you know,
And did you notice a change in the clientele? So dealing with people in New Jersey versus where you are in Connecticut, did you notice people preferred different things? Was there different approach, anything like that, or was it pretty similar?
I would say very similar.
Mm,
Nothing, really heavy to remark.
okay.
Um, People in Jersey love the dark chocolate because I still to this day I only make dark chocolate. I started playing around with milk chocolate, dark milk chocolate. Um, didn't go so well. The tempering didn't come out right.
Uh,
Tastes amazing, but the tempering wasn't done right. And once it gets cold again, I'll probably give it another try.
yeah, milk chocolate's a
But
bit more finicky when it comes to tempering. You gotta cool it down a little bit more.
yeah, yeah. So, and of course I did a big batch too. I was like, I did my regular,
You can still eat
40
it.
bar
Yeah.
oh yeah. Oh no, trust me. I put it in with like coffee beans in like a coffee container. So
Okay.
it has the coffee fragrance.
Ah,
It tastes, yeah, it's good. It's like a little mocha, to it.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
really
yeah.
good. I at first I did it too long and it was too overpowering.
Hmm.
The coffee it was also a dark roast, and it was just like boom, for like after like a week in the little container, it was like super intense.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
dialed it back. I only leave it for 2 days now, and I have a friend of ours who likes to buy it, and she goes, "Where's that bad chocolate that you don't that you are not selling?" I'm like, "Oh, here it is." She buys it all the time. She loves it.
Nice. Very
So
nice.
yeah,
Good.
there's a market for that.
So, what criteria do you use for selecting your cocoa beans? What do you look for? What excites you? Are you still using cacao from your cousin from Ecuador?
I do. Yeah, I still
Yeah.
have every time that somebody travels from Ecuador and they're willing, to bring something, I'll bring up mostly cacao beans, but also sometimes liqueur, um, because he is sort of my cacao hunter down there. He has sent me these other nano batches, 10 pounds of liqueur or 15 pounds of beans here and there, um, from these areas near his farm.
Hmm.
Um, some of them were not so good. They were like a little bit under fermented, or it was too wet because
Hmm.
it's very like a what do you call it? Like a cloud forest. So it's always kind
Humid.
of wet, humid, so hard sometimes
To dry.
um, to get it right, to dry it right, or to ferment it right. I think.
Hmm.
So, but 90% of the lots that he sent me have been outstanding.
Okay.
conguillo, all these little origins that
You're very lucky that you have that direct
very,
connection. Someone does all the legwork, they bring you all this cacao, you get to try it. A lot of makers would dream about
yes,
something like that.
yes. I know how lucky I am, and I'm very thankful. My cousin Rolando from Carrizal de Oro is his company. I did his branding for him. That's
Mm,
how our trade. I design his branding, his packaging, and he provides me with all these
nice.
very rare and amazing origins. Um, which I think I still have some. I saved a couple. I've been aging. The After I get the liqueur, I usually will refine it further, and temper it, and
Hmm.
then don't I don't make bars. I just make one big bar in like a baking sheet, like a thick baking sheet, baking pan rather,
Yeah.
and I put parchment paper under it so it doesn't get that metallic flavor from the pan, and then I temper it and I save it and then I wrap it. I buy this turkey roasting bags. They're like made
Yeah, yeah.
out of parchment paper as well, so that it's just so that there's no plastic or no like
Mm,
aluminum or anything like that that's going to affect the flavor.
mm,
I'm very particular, I guess, going back to the question, like how do I seek out different origins? It
hmm,
has to do with flavor.
mm,
You know, I think I have a gifted palate that I get all this, uh, notes,
yeah.
that completely destroy me, like when I in a good way. I mean, like just like, oh my God, I can't believe, like this the
So
notes that I'm getting from this origin.
let me ask you, because some people who are new to bean to bar making, a lot of them they think that they get a good quality cacao, they roast it, they taste it, they're like, this doesn't taste like the chocolate. This doesn't taste like how they said it would taste. So when you're talking about tasting the cacao, are you talking about tasting the cacao, tasting the finished product, both? Is there a big difference? Like, do you know when you taste the cacao what the chocolate's going to taste like, or is it just a very rough guide? What would you say?
Very good question. So, and this is a good testament of this because, or a good experience in this because I went to pick up a cousin of mine. Actually, my nephew brought me two big bags. He was poor guy. He was. I said, I told you to get a cart when you were at the airport. Why are you dragging the bags around the airport?
Oh.
Get a cart. I'll pay you for the cart. Just dragging them around the airport. Anyway, so we get them into the car and we close the doors and it's winter, and we're driving down the highway and the entire car just smells like heaven, like
Mm,
oh, so there was a mixture of liqueur in one bag and cacao in another one,
mm.
and I just kept going like this from one to another to the other, and one smelled better than the other. Like the cacao from Ecuador is well known for having these incredible aromas and
Mhm.
flavors and everything, but this was something else, man. And I knew, like right there and then, just smelling the cacao beans, and the liqueur, that this was going to be some exceptional chocolate.
Mm,
And so I was very careful, how I make sure I have a dehumidifier in my basement. I have a thermometer, I have an air conditioning if it gets a little bit too warm. I always try to keep the beans, like below 70 degrees Fahrenheit and below 50% humidity. So I'm very careful, when you have a really good ingredient, to treat it as such,
right.
and I guess that's my style of making chocolate is starting with amazing origins, being very careful how, the entire chain of production goes, and finish with something that I'm really proud of. If something comes out that it's too thick, as though too grainy, or it just doesn't have the depth of flavor because I over roasted it or I over ground it. You can grind flavor out of chocolate, as you well know.
Yeah.
So it's happened to me before, where I'm like crying afterwards. I'm like, why did I grind it so much? Because
Mhm.
yeah, I needed to grind it, right? So it becomes smooth, but at the same time, the flavor went away, you know?
Right. Right.
So just finding this balance. And now I have a good recipe. I have a good percentage of how much, cacao I use, how much cacao butter, and how much sugar. And also the controlling the ambient temperature. I've perfected, the process. And in this new house that we are in, we're further up north in Connecticut, so it's a little cooler throughout the year. Even when it's in hot months, it's still not as hot as Jersey.
Mhm.
Um, and I know when to roast, where to roast, what part of the house to use for a certain period, for a certain
Right.
process. I
Yeah.
have a dedicated area in the basement that is only for tempering, that I have, nothing else but just the tempering equipment. Um, and I think I finally found like not finally, but like as of about 8 months ago, I finally found the right groove.
Mm. And so so let's say you're smelling the cacao, do you know what the chocolate's gonna taste like, or do you really have to grind it up to really see what it's gonna taste like?
You have an idea, like
Mm,
the fragrance, and I usually try to capture that fragrance, and I make notes, I said smells like this, smells like that, and then after I make the chocolate, I go to my notes, and usually they're there.
there's some
Like, you have,
parallels.
yeah, there's some parallels that stay, there's some that don't. Um, but yeah, like, that a chocolate bar is going to be amazing by smelling the cacao. Uh, sometimes it doesn't turn out exactly. Sometimes it's not as good. Sometimes it's better, than what you
Well,
what
that's what I
you
was gonna
thought
ask
it would
you.
be.
Is there some times where you smell the cacao, you taste the cacao, and you're like, this is gonna be good chocolate, and then it doesn't turn out? Or sometimes you're like, I don't think this cacao is gonna make good chocolate, and you're surprised that it actually turned out good. Do you ever have those happen?
Usually, if the cacao doesn't smell good, if it's like under fermented, it has like this weird um like a tea almost sort of
Mm,
flavor, and I don't mean like good tea. I mean like bad tea, like this sort of almost soapy.
okay.
Like there's this like this soap kind of vibe to it. Like there's something wrong, like when a cacao is under fermented, um, or fermented incorrectly, or hasn't been stored correctly, it has mold. Yeah, the flavor is affected right away. And I think going back to my nose and my palate, I can detect that like pretty much straight away.
And you
And I
can't
won't use it.
usually recover it at that
No,
point.
you
Yeah.
can't. Like I tried one time because I bought some under fermented beans one time. I'm not going to mention names. Um, and I reached out. I was like, "Hey, this does not smell good." And they're like, "Well, why don't you go ahead and just roast it and make chocolate and see what it tastes like?" So I was like, "All right, I don't think it's gonna be good." And sure enough, it wasn't.
Hmm.
It tasted the way that the beans smelled. It
Right.
had that off flavor, and it's just never, never
Yeah.
again.
It's
Um,
it's really, really hard or impossible to make a good chocolate from beans that are just not good, whether it's too bitter or
yeah,
off flavors. It's really
sorry.
hard to recover those. Yeah. What would you say? You might have mentioned this a little bit, but what would you say is your chocolate style? If you had to say what your style is, because you're a musician, you're an artist, so you understand style. How can you describe your style of your chocolate? Or is it too new to say?
No, I mean my goal is always to make a chocolate that's gonna give you a wow factor. That
Mm,
it's gonna you're going to shake your head, and just gonna be like, this is the
mm,
best chocolate I've ever had. Like that's always my goal,
mm.
it's to make something that is going to just lose your shit, like you're gonna be like, this is amazing. Um, and if the chocolate is not super interesting, like I've done before, where um I was like, this chocolate is good, not the best. But what if I added, dry figs to it, chopped up
Mm,
dry figs to it?
mm,
Because it has that kind of flavor already, right? So if I intensify it a little bit more with some dry figs, what does it taste like?
mm.
And it tastes really good, and it has that extra crunch. And it's a good companion for a chocolate that by itself, may not necessarily be the best.
Right. That's a
But
good point.
if
Yeah.
I why let it go to waste?
Yeah, there's
I'm not
chocolate
gonna throw it away.
that's not bad per se. There's even some makers or some specific bars within a maker that I really like. Some bars they shine, the flavor is so distinct and interesting. And then some are just kind of a bit boring. There's nothing wrong with
Yeah,
it, but
yeah,
it's a bit too doesn't give you that wow factor, right? And like you said,
exactly.
that's a good chocolate to use for inclusions, if flavored bars and things like that, which can really work out
Yeah,
well. Yeah, so that's a good
yeah.
point.
And I've also used outstanding chocolate in the case of the Piedra de Plata origin, which is the origin that TOAC, that famous
Ah,
company
yeah.
uses. It's the same origin. It's the same roaster guy.
Okay.
I get it from. So really good, chocolate. It has very intense. I don't know if you had it. It could be very floral and
Hmm.
very sort of it has like this sort of deep berries kind of note. Really good chocolate.
Hmm.
But I wanted to, just elevate it to another level and add something to it. So I added the Negroni bar
Mm.
nibs. I got some Negroni nibs. I think I was having a Negroni drink one night. I made myself a Negroni drink and I was having a piece of chocolate,
Mm.
and I said, wow, this is a good combo. I should figure out a way to
Yeah.
make these two play. So I got a bunch of nibs, put them in a Negroni drink and put it away for like 3 weeks. And then, took the nibs, dehydrated the alcohol, the liquid out of them. But still the flavor of the alcohol and a little bit of alcohol obviously remains in the nibs. Um, but yeah, the initial bite, you buy the bar of chocolate, the chocolate is good, and then you start biting into the nibs, and then you get this, you know, other layer of, of,
Mm.
of
Mm.
flavor. At first, combining the two of them, and then just by
Interesting.
itself, as the chocolate dissipates, you have the Negroni aftertaste in your mouth, and it's just a party. It's
Yeah,
really fun.
I've had bars that
Yeah,
the nibs were infused with the alcohols, but it sounds like your bar is you have the chocolate and then you have the nibs that are infused, but it's not the whole chocolate is not infused, right?
correct,
Yeah.
correct. Yeah, it's
Okay.
not the
That's
whole
very
chocolate. It's not
interesting.
the whole bar.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because
So
I've
you get
I've
those
seen
little
that method where,
bursts.
yeah, where people dehydrate the nibs and then they put them in the refiner and make the
Right, right.
chocolate with that, and we'll have a cognac or
Yeah.
whiskey. I've seen some people that do with whiskey or with a rum, um, and that's really good too. But I I'm too nervous and too new to do that kind of thing. To dehydrate the nibs and then put them in
Yeah.
the melanger
No,
and
but that's a nice, I didn't even think of
temper
that.
it.
That's a good, the way you did it is a good way, especially for beginners too, that want to add something a
Yep.
little different there. That's cool. Very
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And one time I tried it instead of using gin for the Negroni, I use rum
Mm.
with vermouth and Campari, for the Negroni. And then what I do is I take an orange and I grate with a grater a little bit of the skin, and then and it comes out very oily. The
Right.
the skin when you zest it.
Yeah.
Um, and I put that on top of the I used to do it right on top of the bar when it was molded, but it sticks too much to your gloves. It's a mess. So what I figured was like, oh, why don't I just throw it in with the nibs, mix it all
Mm.
up with the nibs,
Mm.
and then use it like that. And that actually was easier to dose on top of
Interesting.
the wet bars. Um,
Nice.
and the next one I want to do is with instead of gin, use mezcal.
Ah,
Mezcal has
okay.
this kind of smoky flavor, so I want to
Mm.
use, and I might just do just mezcal with nibs, like no
Mm.
Negroni. 'Cause
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
Negroni mezcal, if you ever had one or never
Yeah.
had one, do yourself a favor. It's amazing. It's like this smoky Negroni. It's so good. Um,
Okay.
but that gave me the idea because there's this chocolate that I got from Venezuela that has a bit of a like a smokiness to it. So I was thinking, oh, this will be amazing to do with mezcal, like do
Mm.
mezcal
Mm.
Negroni, I mean,
Hmm. Hmm.
mezcal nibs.
Yeah.
So
Very
that might be the
nice.
next thing.
What are the greatest challenges that you face selling your chocolate to the public? Is it an easy sell? Do you have to educate them a lot? How does that work for you?
I mean, it's not an easy sell to sell dark chocolate. Um, in my area, like up here in this area in the United States in general, people are used to number one, the sweet. They want that's what people look for mostly, the majority of the people. Um, so yeah, a lot of educating, the consumer aspect of it. Also the price. People are not used to paying 10, 12, $15 for, 50 grams of chocolate because they're
Yeah.
like, you got to be nuts. Yeah, you charge, you know, $10 for a little square of chocolate.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, this is not chocolate that of.
You're
Like
not
this
gonna
is
find it in Trader
without
Joe's.
yeah, without trying to sound all snob,
Yeah. Yeah.
like that's the fine line, like
Yeah.
educating the customer. And I usually, I tell them like beans are very expensive. Like
Yeah.
the beans that I use for these are very expensive. Um, they're beans that are what's the word? Priced because of
Hmm.
how they taste,
Yeah.
not because of they're
Yeah.
not for a mass market,
I understand like some people, consumers who don't know anything about fine chocolate, craft chocolate,
Yeah.
they make assumptions that it's costly because maybe the branding, maybe because you can, they
Right.
don't understand that there's good reasons why it's so expensive, why the beans cost
Yeah.
more. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really tough to change people's perceptions. Like you said, a lot of people, not just in the States, but in the world, associate chocolate with sugar. They go hand in hand. It has to be sweet, right? So when they taste something that's not super sweet, their brain gets a little confused. It's not what they expect. And
A very good example of what you just said, because the other day, so I'm a cottage operation. I make the chocolate in my house. I have a specially designated area that I use only for chocolate making. I have a license, from the state of Connecticut. I'm like all legit, so I can sell. Um, People can come to my house and pick up chocolate. I can't go selling to like in stores and stuff like that, but I have my Instagram account, I have my website. People come over, and any other day, this person came to pick up some chocolate, but it wasn't for him. He said he was buying it for his father-in-law, who loves dark chocolate. Um, and when he came to pick it up, I usually, when people come pick it up, I'll give them like a small little bag with a few samples
mm.
of another bar, that they didn't buy, just to introduce them to it. And I give it to him, and he goes, "Oh, no, 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 I don't eat candy." I said, "Oh, no, no, this is not candy. This is a
Yeah.
whole nother bag." This is what I said. This is a whole nother bag.
Yeah.
I like that. My musician, words still come in handy here and there. I said, "This is a whole nother bag, man."
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, and he tried it like that right there and then. He goes, "Oh my God, you're absolutely right. This is amazing." Blah blah blah. And he's like, "Give me two of those." Like I had to go back down and grab a couple more bags. And he said he ate them in the car with his wife, and they were flipping out over it.
Mm.
So that's, I guess, when you mention also what are the challenges, is, obviously, not obviously, but because of my circumstances, our son being very special needs, and other family challenges, I can't open a store, or I
Mm.
can't like go open a storefront,
Yeah.
or even like a commercial kitchen, at this point.
Yeah.
Um, so that's the number one challenge, is having all these ideas and all this, stock. I even have
Right.
like a bunch of inventory right now that I have, because I've been busy making chocolate for the winter season, once it gets cold. Um, and I bought one of those little penguin air conditioners, so I could make chocolate in the winter, temper chocolate in the winter in my basement. It was cold, but it wasn't cold enough.
Mm. Mm.
So I needed to make it cooler. So I got one of those things that I had to make it cooler, and it came out good. But the challenge is not having, not being able to do a lot of farmers markets also
Marketing, right?
with
Getting it
my
out there, letting people know.
with my type of cottage license. I'm not
Yeah.
allowed to do farmers markets. Um,
Uh, so it's interesting because
yeah,
some places you can, some places you can't. I guess in Connecticut there you
exactly.
can't.
In
Yeah.
Connecticut, you can't. So, but I have done pop-ups. Um, a couple of people have, so I went to this bakery the other day, and I got there and she already sold out of everything. And, but I still came out to the window because I saw the lights were on and
Mm.
there were people in there. So I'm like, I come over to the window and I kind of make my sad puppy face. And the lady goes, "Oh, come in, come in." She felt so bad. She started collecting things and putting things in a box and I'm like, "Oh, I guess you're not sold out." And she goes, "Here, take this, take this. These are free." I'm like,
Oh.
"Wow, that's amazing marketing for from this lady, that opening up her store and like
Yeah, yeah.
giving me stuff, for free because she sold out of pretty much everything." Um, I don't know why. Like I said, "Oh, I gotta bring you some chocolate because I make dark chocolate."
Mm.
And she goes, "Oh, you make dark chocolate?" So the next time I went, I brought her a bag and she tried it and she loved it. And she goes, "You should do a pop-up here."
Mm.
And I'm like, "Oh, wait, thank you." So I just keep, reaching out
Yeah,
or not, or just giving people a lot of free chocolate,
yeah.
to get that connection to
Yeah, you're
make
very
my
you're
brand
very
known.
new. You're very new. You don't have a storefront,
Yeah,
right? It's going to take
yeah,
some time, but it sounds
yeah,
like regardless of that, you're still making headway. People are finding you, like the guy
yeah,
doesn't even like chocolate, but he found you, he came to your house and he bought it. So that's really good news. And you converted someone in one moment. That's hard to do.
yeah,
Someone who not
yeah.
crazy about candy or dark chocolate, right away
I
they loved
know.
it. So that's a good
Yeah, no,
testimony.
I was telling a friend, like when I do the pop-up stores like this, I've done like 4 or 5 by now, a couple in Jersey and about 2 or 3 up here. Um, and 80 to 90% of the people that try the chocolate, they buy it
Mm,
because of the
that's good.
setting. Number one, it's at a coffee shop
Mm,
or at the bakery that I just mentioned, or the other one was at a distillery that they did
mm,
an artisan fair with local artists. You
nice.
know, um, some people were selling pottery, some people were selling antiques. And I was the chocolate guy. But 80% of the people, I'm telling you, so that's why I think that a storefront would do amazing because, you know, well, obviously there has to be some kind of foot traffic. Um, and you just put somebody out there, or myself out there giving out free samples, and that's all it takes. It's
Yeah.
for the person to try it. And usually everyone is willing to try chocolate, right?
A-
Especially if it's free. Like they're like, "Here's a piece of free dark chocolate." And everybody's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, yes."
And
They pop it in their mouth.
an interesting point is that they try it and they buy it, which means that it must be really good because they're buying a $10 bar, however much your bars are. So,
Yeah,
they're not just, oh, this is like a $2, $3 bar. This is good. I'll buy it. It's really,
right.
it's good. And wow, it's expensive. And I still want to buy it. So that must say
Yeah.
something, right?
Yes, exactly. Because and as you know, it's not just my chocolate. Like
No.
it's
Yeah.
most craft chocolate
Yeah.
is some other level, of chocolate. It's not your regular chocolate.
Yeah.
Like it stops you in your tracks. Like it makes you do a double take of, and most everybody that tries the chocolate, they're like, "This is the best chocolate I've ever had." I'm
Yeah.
sure you've heard this 100,000 times,
Yeah. And
because there's just no comparison.
I think your story is also good for people who, because I think we need to, even if it's just a hobby, we need to have more people out there understanding this concept of bean to bar chocolate, fine cacao, and making chocolate, even if it's just to give to your friends and make it at home, because
Yeah,
it educates people around you, and more people start to understand what this is all about, and they start to appreciate it and respect it, and they'll start to buy it. So I think it's your story is nice because it shows that, hey, I can have another job, I can have a family life, and I can still create incredible chocolate on the side and make something of it. So that's really nice to hear. I think it's really special what you have, and it sounds like you're doing a great job. People are really enjoying it. I have to try it
thank you.
sometime
Yeah.
too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We'll make sure you get some.
Yeah. So we talked about some of the challenges. We talked a little bit, you already mentioned a little bit about pairings. So would you say that pairings are important component of promoting craft chocolate? And what pairings have you done other than the coffee, which you mentioned? Either
Just
yourself
the
or
coffee.
just in general. Okay.
In general, just the coffee. I pair with everything. I pair
Yeah.
it here at home, with cheese, with
Connecticut has
tea.
lots of good cheese, right? Is that what they're known for?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
They do. They do. I need to. It's just, it's so limiting sometimes, like not being able to go out too much, because of our circumstances. But I would love to go to, a cheese factory or a cheese,
Mm,
uh, a dairy farm or something like that, to uh, to bring them the chocolate, to have them pair it and taste it and whatnot. But all of that, it's in I
in
hope,
time.
in the future, yeah,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
time. But yeah, I also love it with I love pairing it with
Mm,
port wine, with whiskey.
yeah.
Um, Pretty much. I love just eating it also with bread,
Mm,
like piece of bread, piece of chocolate.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a chocoholic for sure.
What would you say to people that want to, they have chocolate, maybe they buy a lot of craft chocolate and they're getting kind of bored just eating it, they want to pair it. Do you have any advice for pairing, or do you just say, just try it, see if it works? What would you say to them?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, through your series of podcasts or
Oh, okay.
educational interviews,
Videos?
I've learned quite a bit about pairing,
Mm, mm,
about not giving people too much information, like or imposing what you think that the chocolate tastes like. Oh, this chocolate has this. And I think I forget which episode. Here, have a piece of chocolate.
yeah,
Like that's the
yeah,
first thing that should happen at any
yeah,
point in any kind of meeting. Like you come into the store, you come into my house, or I'm at a pop up. It's like, here you go, have a piece of chocolate.
mm,
Try some chocolate. And they're like, wow, this is really good. And then
yeah.
they say it. Oh, it tastes like this or it
Yeah,
tastes
I
like
think that's an
that.
important point. Ask them, what do you
Yeah,
taste? Instead of
yeah,
telling them, because if you tell them and they don't taste what you say, they're going to feel defeated, right? And then they're going to lose
exactly,
interest,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's good to, give them like, I do say, like on my descriptions in my website, our tasting notes.
Right.
We taste this, that, that. But as the more that I that I get into it, the shorter I make those descriptions. Just
Mm,
because I like going back to having everybody has a different palate. Some people do taste other things. And that's fine too. But at the end of the day, is does it make them happy?
right,
And do they want to do it again?
right.
Like that's
Yeah, I
the
think you have
takeaway.
to, people need, a lot of people need something to go by. Is it going to be fruity? Is it going to be earthy? Like, give me something to go by.
Yeah.
But at the end of the
Hmm.
day, they have to taste what it is they're tasting. They articulate it in their way. And I think when it comes to fine foods, the whole, whether it's wine, coffee, whatever, people feel very intimidated. A lot of people feel very intimidated,
Oh yeah.
right? So you have to take away that intimidation and like you said, just say, try it. What do you think? Tell me what you think, and then go from
Funny
there.
when you were just talking, you reminded me of when I was a waiter. And we would have our daily specials. And um, we would have to describe the specials to the client.
Mm,
Is this piece of fish and it's done like this with this type of sauce, blah blah blah. You know, I always found that to be so. I mean, I gave them a little bit of the guidelines, but
mm,
then they are the ones who say, "Oh, this tastes like this," or "It's amazing," or "It's I
mm,
don't
mm,
actually
mm.
don't want it, send it back," which rarely happens. But it's an opportunity to give them, like you said, some sort of structure,
Yeah,
and then let them,
yeah,
run with it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, because food is very intimate. Food is very personal. It can be very spiritual for people. So you want them to
Yeah,
feel like they're what they think matters in a way too. Yeah, and that's good. I like that
agree.
you always pairing with different things around the house because that's how you discover new flavors, new creations as well.
I know. I wanna do little bacon bits at one point.
Ah, okay, okay. Nice. would you say, just because you were in music for a long time, and I like to use music as an analogy, I'm just curious, would you say there's any parallels between music and fine chocolate? What would you say?
I think so, very much so. When you listen to music casually, like you're in a car or as a back in the background, or just in general, jogging or what have you, um, there comes a time when you're like, oh, I want to listen to this with headphones. Like I want to really dig in, and feel the bass more or hear
Mm-hmm.
more of the nuances,
Mm,
of this piece of music. Because it makes me feel a certain way, right? Music evokes emotions.
yeah.
Um, so I think chocolate is similar in that sense, where when you have you don't just buy a craft bar of chocolate, a really good bar of chocolate, to just gobble it up. You
Right.
buy it because you really know, like, you're about to have a very amazing
Yeah.
experience
That's a good
by
point
itself.
because you mentioned, music could be sort of in the background thing, but then sometimes you're like,
Right,
no, 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 like I want to feel this song. So let me put on my
right,
headphones. And yeah, that's a
right.
good analogy because the chocolate's like,
Yeah,
wait, I want to really get the most out of this.
yeah. So you you find the right setting, right? Like you're not just eating it, but you're you know, maybe calmly sitting somewhere by yourself or with friends, which is even more fun, where like
Yeah.
everybody's smelling it, and
Very
um,
present, paying attention.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Very present, very intentional. And um, you mentioned the word ceremony before, and there's this whole ceremonial cacao thing that I'm not too crazy about, but everybody has their thing, and
Right.
I think when you take a piece of really good chocolate and you smell it, it puts you in another world.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's so deep and so floral and so rich, and it
Even if
there's the
the
chemical.
even
I
if the
was going to say there's the chemical aspect of it where your brain makes you feel like you're in love. That's an actual scientific finding. It's not just hoopla. It's actual
yeah,
scientific data that says that your certain parts, I forget what parts of your brain, you know, have the same feelings like when you're in love.
right.
And it's true
And I
for me.
think even even though the chocolate we grew up with was not fine chocolate, the smell of it is similar. Like when you're smelling fine chocolate, it's not the same as tasting it. It's so when you come into a place and you smell chocolate, all those fond memories of you eating chocolate as a kid growing up are part of that as well, because you have this
Mhm.
history of chocolate. Even if it was just a commercial chocolate, the smell and what it makes you feel is still there. So that's
I
a
think that
really good point.
happened, definitely happened to me because, yeah, as a kid, all I ate was commercial chocolate,
Yeah.
but I also smelled, and my mom used to make, when my uncle sent us, back home. So we used to go in the summer to my uncle's farm, um, and, and for vacation, but we also, help out around the farm with harvesting, with, cleaning up here and there, and it was great. And he'll send us home. He'll like stuff money in our pockets. We're like, no, come on, uncle, you don't have to pay me. He'll like literally have to stuff or put money in our bags, hidden in our bags. So when we go home, we're like, oh, there's money. um, but he always also sent us home with fresh cheese that he made from his cattle.
Mm,
Amazing country cheese. Um, Plantains, he'll send us home with like a box of stuff. And we own a grocery store. So I come
mm,
to his house with a box of like, canned things that, he couldn't get up in the farmhouse, right? So like tuna fish or beans or things, not beans, because he had plenty of beans up there, but like usually like tuna fish or sardines.
mm,
Um, you know, I forget what else, like rice, maybe my mom would
mhm.
send a box filled with groceries when we went to visit them and stay with them for like a month or sometimes 2 months, because it was like during our summertime.
Mhm.
And it was incredible, like all the fragrances, like you said, like cacao drying out in the field,
Did you
um,
guys try to
in the
did you eat
sun.
the fruit too when you were
Oh
growing
yeah,
up? Yeah. Did you
oh
like
yeah,
it?
oh my God, oh my
Yeah.
God, yeah, I loved it. But I ate it. I liked it too much because it could send you to the bathroom if you have too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember my cousins just being like, "Oh yeah, go ahead, you love it, you know it. Oh yeah, I running to the bathroom." Um, but yeah, I was gonna say, fast forward to being an adult here in the U.S. and trying these bars from Pacari from Ecuador, and they have guayas, they have manabi, um, and I could smell like when I put the bar to my nose and I closed my eyes, you could smell certain fragrances from Ecuador,
Mm.
from those specific areas.
Hmm.
And you can call me crazy, but I smell them. Like when
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember when I used to travel in Europe, with the band, and in Belgium or France or whatever, I walk into a chocolate store and I looked at all the origins, Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador. That's the one I went for first. I always went for Ecuador first, and I smell it, and I'm like, oh, this is the one, blah blah. And then I would say, oh, this is probably from X province, because I didn't have the province, they just said Ecuador,
Mm.
and I was like, I bet you this is from X, and I dug in, I would like ask if there was somebody there, who made it, that knew where it came from, that would say the region, and usually I had it. Usually I
Mm.
was right.
Mm.
That's when I was like, oh man, maybe I do have a privileged nose after all.
Yeah.
Anyway, the uh, the point I wanted to make was that the chocolate, the cacao, when it's drying out, after fermenting and it's drying out in the big cement yards, it has an air, a fragrance in the air.
Mm.
And sometimes that fragrance, after it's been drying for a while and it's a little too hot, you start getting like straight up roasting aromas, because it's
Mm.
so hot. And then the cement is so hot that it's no longer just drying, it's roasting. And I
Mm.
don't know if you've seen sometimes raw beans that have like a burned bottom. That's
Mm.
because they've been on the hot concrete, for too
Not
long.
moving it around
Um,
enough.
and not moving it, around enough, or in a corner somewhere where they wouldn't able to
Mm.
move those around. It got really hot. Um, but those fragrances still stick with me to this day.
Mm. So what would be the best way for people to connect with you in Connecticut there, or if you ship, where do you ship?
So right now, I was actually looking at my website. I only ship to US and Canada for now. I have sent stuff to Europe, in the past. I have an old bandmate of
Mm.
mine who lives um, in Zurich, in Switzerland,
Oh, okay.
whose wife is Swiss,
Mm.
and she's like, "Man, this is the best chocolate I've ever had." Like, and she's Swiss,
And she's
so
Swiss. Yeah.
yeah, so that's but
That says something.
they sweet chocolate anyway. You always think, oh, they're European, they know dark chocolate, and not necessarily, because there's a lot of junk chocolate in Europe too, and the
Yeah.
majority of the chocolate in Europe is not good.
Yeah, the owner
Um,
of Criollo Quetzal, he was saying that he's in Switzerland, and he was saying that in Switzerland, all they eat is milk chocolate, sweet milk chocolate, and it's the
yep,
tourists that want the dark chocolate, not the local
yep.
people.
Yeah, that was me in Switzerland. Like, where's the dark chocolate? Where's the dark chocolate? Always found it, but it's easy to find. That's for sure. If you look for it. But yeah, online, I ship wherever you want me to ship. I'll ship. I'm on Instagram, Chokaico, at Chokaico on Instagram. Yeah, pop-ups. If you want me to do a pop-up in your place, call me.
Yeah, awesome. Excellent. Well, thank you, Fernando. It was really nice to talk to you. I liked hearing your story, and
My pleasure.
I wish you a lot of success with this, and I hope it continues to grow. I hope more and more people there find you and find your chocolate.
Thank you, Joseph. It's been a privilege. It really, I feel honored to be
Oh, thank you.
interviewed by you.
Well, thank you so much, and I wish you all the best. You take care.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Download the free Bean to Bar app to connect with incredible chocolate makers from around the world. Also be sure to visit beantobarworld.com, your portal for all things fine chocolate, virtual tastings, free learning resources, research, and much more. Subscribe to the newsletter to stay in touch, and donate to the free app and free resources here. Contact me for any chocolate-related questions you may have.